All right, I think we will go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's conversation, PUSD, Entering the Era of Transformative Education. Before I introduced our host, Board of Education Vice President Michelle Richardson Bailey, I'd like to thank you for being here tonight. Let me take a few moments to recognize Dr. Jarrell Hill, Dean of Education at Pacific Oaks College, and Helen Hill, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, Instruction and Professional Development in the PUSD. We also have Nancy Dufford, the Executive Director of the Pasadena Education Network. I also see Ms. Rose Riley from the California School Employees Association. I see also Mr. Scott Harden, the president of the PTA Council. Am I missing anyone? Thank you all for being here tonight.
Yes, you miss Nia Bailey, the president of the African American Parents Council.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Welcome, Ms. Nia Bailey, president of the African American Parent Council. Am I missing
Dr.
anyone else?
Stanley Johnson.
Dr. Stanley Johnson, professor at UCLA. Welcome, Dr. Johnson. Am I missing anyone else, Ms. Bailey?
And then everyone else.
And then everyone else. Welcome. So we will hear a little bit later from Dr. Kimi Wilson, founder, chief executive officer, Equation to Success, as well as our own Dr. Elizabeth Blanco, PUSD's chief academic officer. So this is the fourth in the series of community conversations hosted by board member Bailey. And by the way, board member Bailey is a little bit under the weather tonight. So we're gonna have her to rest her voice a little bit, and we'll kind of pick up the slack for her. We won't ask her to do too much talking. So as you may recall, the first community conversation hosted by Vice President Bailey was from Brown to school closures. And we had student panelists, school district staff, invited guests, and other community members who told their stories about their experiences as students in our schools. This was a powerful evening of storytelling. And while we didn't get to the topic of school closures, it was a very meaningful exercise to have engaged in that conversation. The second community conversation was titled Back to the Future. And as you may recall, the George Floyd murder had just happened. And so Ms. Bailey scheduled this conversation as a means of spurring everyone to action. She followed this up by creating two resolutions, Resolution 2566, titled Pasadena Unified School District's Commitment to Black Students, and 2586, Pasadena Unified School District's commitment to Latino, Latina, Latinx, and Indigenous students. The resolutions committed our district to eradicating any practices, policies, systems, and curriculum that have a bias and could be considered racist or suppressive to Black, Latino, and Indigenous students. She advocated for and won unanimous approval from the Board of Education. So then the third community conversation was titled The Intersectionality of Cultural Responsiveness and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And Mrs. Bailey's aim here was to respond was rather to highlight the importance of culturally responsive practices vis-a-vis diversity, equity, and inclusion. So today's conversation is titled PUSD, Entering the Era of Transformative Education. So as it relates to our school district, the creation of a culturally responsive school culture is an ongoing and ever-evolving process. So it's been nearly 2 years since those resolutions were approved. And I must say that PUSD has come a long way in addressing any sort of systemic bias in academics and operations. So here are some of the things that we have done so far. We have developed an equity mission, and that will guide our work together on diversity, equity, and inclusion to provide a safe and supportive environment where we work to eradicate systemic inequalities, including but not limited to racism, microaggressions, and unconscious biases used in a derogatory manner towards Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our entire school system, so that all employees, students, and families can grow and thrive in our journey towards equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We now use a litmus test that helps to ingrain these concepts into the district's very fiber. The litmus test questions, so the questions, the 3 questions in the litmus test apply to all aspects of the school district to align systems with DEI. Then we have our student think tank and leadership team that brings together a diverse group of students. And their task is to have conversations and make recommendations that will inform our instructional and curricular decisions. So we're really proud of our students for how they've stepped up and advocated for the things that they need and things that they think the district should be engaged in. In the fall of 2021, our PUSD high schools began offering an ethnic studies course where students explore an interdisciplinary field of study that encompasses such subjects including history, literature, economics, sociology, anthropology, and political science. So, so we are addressing persistent issues. And we know some of these issues to be the fact that Black students are underrepresented among students with successful academic outcomes in PUSD. And so armed with that knowledge, we are compelled to work towards broader goals to equip and prepare our leaders and students with the tools and skills needed to advocate, organize, and mobilize to disrupt racism and advance social justice in education. Another thing that we're doing is we're addressing the disproportionate percentages of suspensions of Black students and the impact on the community. And we're very pleased that our African American Parent Council has come alongside us to work on this issue. And although suspension rates have decreased overall for many racial groups, as a percent, our Black students continue to experience suspensions at a higher rate than other students. So we will continue to work on this very vexing issue. So we are on a mission to improve the present. And this is why tonight's conversation is so very important. So Board Member Bailey, I know that you have to rest and we don't want you talking too much, but if you would like to say a few words before we get started, you may do so at this time.
I just want to welcome everyone and to thank you all for attending. I know it's Friday night and there's so much going on in the community, so I appreciate you taking the time out to be here with us this evening. And I can't wait to hear where this conversation is going to take us, because it's always very interesting when we do these. I'm looking forward to hearing from our keynotes and all of you once the Q&A portion of the discussion starts. So hang in there with us, try to stay to the end. We have some fun and games that we're going to do, and I think this is going to be a great time. So thank you for being here.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Bailey. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Jeff Albert, Director of Collaborate Pasadena.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. Board Member Bailey asked me to go over some meeting norms as we go through the evening. So I'm just going to share my screen briefly and just go over some the meeting norms. So in order to allow every voice to be heard and value their contributions, we ask you that you all listen to understand and seek unity, not separation. Seek common ground in understanding and not problems and conflict. Treat everything you hear as an opportunity to learn and to grow. So during the presentations, mics will be off. During Q&A, we'll allow you to unmute and ask questions. We've also disabled chat right now because that can be disrupting to the presenters, and also we don't want your questions to get lost among a long list of other chat related things. So while the presentations and keynotes are going on, mics will be off and chat will be disabled, but as soon as Q&A, we will open up the ability to unmute yourself and to put questions in the chat. So I will let you know when those have been enabled. And as I said, chat will be open during Q&A only. And then again, just reiterating the community conversation norms: allow every voice to be heard, value their contributions, listen to understand, seek unity, seek common ground in understanding, not problems and conflicts. And then we have this quote. Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen and then I am gonna turn this over to Denise Bowman, who has got an icebreaker for us.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Maybe a thumbs up to ensure that. Perfect. Thank you. So I'm the worst millennial because I cannot download my background. Please forgive me, millennial gods. I will do my best to improve my behaviors. We're just going to do kind of a fun introductory game. As you would listen to the superintendent, he'd mentioned that there were a series of meetings before this one had taken place. So it's always, and I was a teacher, it's always a great idea to know who's walking into the classroom and the information that they have, before we host the conversation. So this is going to be a game. It's going to be fun-ish, kind of, after work and everything, to kind of shake off the day and do something that's informative and engaging. So what I'm going to do is attempt to share my screen. Let me see. Okay, share. Very good. And so can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And what we have here are the instructions for how you will play this game. No, stop what you're doing. And it just says you'll go to this website, but when I put the game, oh, go on.
Ms. Bowman, your screen is blank though. I can see your screen, but it's blank. There's nothing on it.
Is it? Let's see if you can see this one better. Can you guys see this screen?
No, it's still white. Like maybe try stop sharing and then sharing again. Sometimes that helps.
Okay, stop share. Optimize, share sound. Okay, perhaps now, I hope, maybe.
The screen share stopped.
I know that I did send it over to you, Geoff, so.
Oh, so is that the Kahoot thing?
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, let me go. I'll go ahead and share it on my end.
Okay.
So hold on.
I gave you all power. I sent you everything via email. I was like, please, please, you're the one who's savvy in tech. I'm very, chisel and old school. I still write pen and paper.
Okay, so let's try. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so this is just the instruction on how you will play this game. I'm not entirely sure once we start to play the game if that code is what you'll be using, but it's pretty intuitive. And I know we've been playing Zoom for about 6,000 years since the pandemic. So Kahoot or Slido, it's not a completely unfamiliar platform, I hope. And so let's proceed to the game because it's very quick so we can get to our speaker. And it is one, it's Let's Play a Game is what it's titled. And hopefully it'll grant you the access.
Yeah, I see names popping up on my, I've got the game here, so I'll go ahead and start once we have a few more.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I hope everyone is appreciating this rainy-esque weather. It's nice to have moisture in the air.
Yeah, it's beautiful out.
And just note, yes, it's a game, but the prize is learning. We don't have any prizes. The prize is gaining the information, everybody. Knowledge is power.
All right, so we have quite a few number in the room. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and then we will get started. Let's play a game. Okay. Oh, let me see. Next question. All right, Scott and Mackie B.
All right, good job, guys.
Next question's coming up.
Number 2. Means that each child receives what they need to develop to their full academic and social potential. And you just select the little shape. All right, we're getting some answers. Okay, let's see who's gonna win this. Oh, who was it? Will they show?
I guess Blue.
And next.
Hmm.
Oh, just next.
Yeah.
Oh, Scott Harden, my goodness, PTA must be having these very engaged conversations. My gosh. Let's see.
Yeah, you missed the meeting today too.
Okay, next.
Okay, teaching and learning geared to empower learners to make informed decisions and actions at the individual and community level. Let's see, what do we think? Transformative education, community school, social justice education, democratic education. They're all relatively close to each other. Okay, perfect. Let's see. Is it going to be Scott
Okay,
again?
let's see.
Oh my gosh, it's Scott. I swear you must have been over here at 1 a.m. because that's when I was working on this. That is interesting.
All right, next up.
Let's see. Believe that students from certain backgrounds or social groups have differing intellectual abilities and or ambitions. Is this discrimination? Could be. Stereotyping students, possibly. Bias in the classroom, well. Inequity? I wonder. Oh, look at that, it varies. Okay, let's see. Someone
Right.
just pushed Scott out of the way.
Oh,
Oh,
got
Mackie
lots of
B, oh
fun.
my goodness. Playground fights at the end of the day. I can't believe he pushed him, my goodness. Let's see. Last one, guys. Refers to acknowledging a range of differences in the classroom and embracing their differences. Equality, equity, people mix those up very often. Diversity and inclusion, culturally responsive teaching. We love the light bulb. It's like yellow, red, blue, which one? We think in color, some of us, and not in shape. Okay, let's see,
All right.
Who's gonna be the one to take the lead? Let's see who places. Okay, Miss Nia, perfect. Third place. Second, Sylvia Leo, congratulations. Number one, let's see, drum roll, bum, 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 bum. Mackie B, perfect.
Yes.
You are the one who's got all the information. That's lovely. Well, let's hear the conversation today and where it's going to lead you.
All right.
Dr. McDonald, you're welcome to take over. You are next.
All right. Well, that was fun. Okay. So let's bring up Laura Diaz Allen as our parent panelist. Obviously, Miss Diaz Allen is a parent in our district. She also happens to sit on the Penn board and is very active in advocating for the rights of parents in our district. So, Ms. Diaz Allen.
Hello, good evening. I'm actually on the staff of Penn. I am the Director of Parent Engagement.
Oh, there you go.
The other guy is on the board that's going to join us. I'm the parent of two teenagers attending Pasadena High School who has been volunteering in one way or another for their schools and Pasadena Unified since the oldest started kinder. Now, if you ask my kids why I've done it, they'll playfully roll their eyes and tell you it's part of a master plan to ruin their social lives. But if you wait a second, I hope that they would add that education is really important to mom, who worked hard as an undocumented immigrant and English learner, not only to go to college, but to help other kids like herself do the same. And they'd be right. I love learning and appreciate in a very personal way what formal education can do to open doors, especially for disadvantaged students, and help people become their best selves. So even though I can't offer an official definition of what transformative education means, as I'm not an actual educator, I am honored and delighted to join you this evening and share examples of what transformative education means to me as a parent. Here we go. I am 7 or 8 years old and struggling to understand fractions. My mom, a teacher, cuts an orange in 4 and shows me 1/4, 1/2, the whole orange. We do it a few times and then I eat the fractions. After that, I like math more, but I still have questions about why we don't grow orange trees in our bellies when we swallow seeds. I'm in 10th grade now. My first period French teacher, who escaped the Nazis, makes us do calisthenics while repeating, "Réveillez-vous." We're scared of her, so we move and wake up, like she's asking us to do. I grow to love this fierce lady and my French gets decent. I go to UCLA as a French literature major. Last year of college, Dr. Hanker notices me crying in the back of her class on childhood disorders after a bad breakup. She approaches me afterwards, and when I tell her the whole story between sobs, she says, "Great, now you're free to pursue your interests, go to graduate school, and fight for kids." I get into a program in child psychology with a powerful letter of recommendation from this legendary professor. Like her, I focus on learning disabilities. Fast forward to being a mom and having a son in 1st grade who refuses to write down adjectives to describe apple because it's a boring fruit and nobody cares about it, Mom. We cross out apple and fill in the name of a toy he likes. He happily writes down words to describe this thing to an alien that has just landed in the yard. His teacher, when I explain what we did, beams and pledges to let students learn adjectives in a more flexible manner. Now, Mr. Pro, he was my oldest son's 3rd grade math teacher. Had enough energy after an hour-long drive to start each day by yelling, "Let's make some mistakes," and sing songs about math with his guitar. During recess, he played handball with the kids. My anxious child started to relax around math and enjoy it. He later joined Math Academy, passed a Calculus BC AP test in 8th grade, and takes 3 more years of college level math. He's currently a junior considering a career in STEM. What do these examples of so many have in common? Teachers, bright, caring, flexible, well-trained teachers who are present, connecting with their students, inspiring them, and literally changing their lives. As a parent and someone who supports other parents through my work at Pasadena Education Network, my most fervent desire is that all our children experience powerful, inspiring, effective teaching by teachers who feel valued and supported by their schools, districts, parents, and entire communities. And I look forward to continue working locally to remove obstacles and ensure that all children's lives are enriched by their education. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Diaz-Allen. All right. And so now let me invite Mr. Nate Bradley to present on what transformative education means to him. Mr. Bradley is a parent, also a parent in our district, and is very active with the African American Parent Council. So, Mr. Bradley.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. So what does transformative education mean to me as a parent? Again, my name is Nate Bradley. My wife and I have 4 kids that have graduated or are currently attending PUSD schools. I've either been involved with or currently participate in the PTA, AAPC, School Site Council, PEN, et cetera, et cetera. But I realized that starting out as a younger parent, I didn't have as much time in the beginning because I commuted for a couple of hours each way. But as I got older and my commute decreased, the time that I was able to spend on campus increased. So my kids see me quite a bit more. When I think of transformative education, I think of an expanding box that we all pass through, filled with millions of different variables that take into account that not everyone's backgrounds, upbringings, perceptions, learning styles, maturity levels, or experiences are ever exactly the same at precisely the same exact moment. The common denominator can be the same, for example, graduation, but the methods we utilize to get there could vary dramatically. I also think of a revamped system that considers the everyday reality of modern life, the seemingly easier choices like a school and activity schedule that acknowledges that many families are made up of dual income or single and only income households and embraces that as the norm. I imagine a transformation that concedes the fact that many children have smartphones that might be 100 times more powerful than a Chromebook that they have. And what must be going through their minds when dealing with textbooks or overhead projectors or possibly someone who doesn't know tech. I imagine we could utilize the brain power and tech that creates apps like TikTok and Snapchat and have it help us to create a multifaceted contemporary educational system that can handle or take into account the millions of variables that I mentioned earlier. Finally, I look at my own early education experiences and how we can get to know each other better. Of significance, I experienced the receiving end of busing, where white and Asian kids were bused into my 99% Black public elementary school from the West Side. But on the flip side, later attending a public school in the Santa Monica, Malibu area, where I was the 0.1% of that school, and my dad was a janitor seeking out a better education for his son. What I remember the most about those experiences is the shock of me not knowing what I didn't know, and in return, how those teachers in Santa Monica had no idea how to relate to me. And now, as a parent, trying to relate to my own kids who've grown up in a relatively posh Pasadena, trying to keep them motivated and realizing it takes a village sometimes, because I don't know how to motivate kids who've had it easier than I do. So I consult with teachers, staff, and friends sometimes for tips and advice. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bradley. All right, so now it's time to hear from our first keynote speaker, Dr. Kimi Wilson. Dr. Wilson is the founder and chief executive officer of Equity to Success, an educational consulting firm dedicated to revolutionizing education in underserved communities through partnerships with school districts, schools, businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout California and nationwide. Dr. Wilson was one of the authors of the Humanizing Education for Equitable Transformation, HEAT, community of schools model currently operationalized in the Los Angeles Unified School District, Local District West, in collaboration with Dr. George McKenna. Dr. Wilson has served as Assistant Professor of Curriculum and Instruction in the Charter College of Education at Cal State LA. Dr. Wilson's career in K through 20 education spans over 20 years. He has served in numerous roles, including teacher, curriculum specialist, and education director of a National Science Foundation Nanotechnology Engineering Research Center at UCLA to increase minoritized populations representation in STEM. Dr. Wilson also served as a principal investigator for the Future Male Minority Teachers of California to increase male teachers of color throughout the California university system. Dr. Wilson also served as co-principal investigator for a Howard Hughes Medical Institute grant seeking to advance equitable outcomes in the sciences. Dr. Wilson is the author of Black Boys Lived and Everyday Experiences in STEM, an ethnographical journey into the lives of 4 Black boys' quest to develop math and science identities in K-12 public schooling. Dr. Wilson serves as a board member for Minds Matter LA, Los Angeles, CARES Mentoring, and College Bridge. He is a member of Phi Kappa Phi Honor Society, and his family is the greatest joy of his life. Welcome, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald, for that warm introduction. And wait a minute, I just have to say, how do I follow Laura Diaz, Allen, and Nate Bradley? I mean, they just brought it. And I love parents. So it just warmed my heart to just hear from them. And so thank you so much. Jeff, do I control my slides or? Oh, perfect. We're ready to go. So thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this community conversation today. This is an important topic and a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So we're talking about entering the era of transformative education. So glad to be in conversation with the Pasadena Unified School District. And as you know, I am Dr. Kimi Wilson. In that picture that you see on the slide, I'm a scholar, but I also still engage in schools, and I'm almost there every day of the week, right? And so the picture that you see, actually, this is an LAUSD K-12 SPAN school, and I'm actually working with their middle school teaching staff. So I'm working with teachers. I'm doing professional development with teachers from 6 through 8. I'm also doing classroom observations. So that entails classroom observations, that entails lesson planning with teachers, strategic planning with administration. And then I also run an initiative called the Young Black Mathematicians. And so what you see in that picture is a group of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school students. And we actually do math from 3:30 to 5 p.m. after school. And in that, I also have a Black parent support group that also I meet with regularly to make sure that I am also, not only am I working with the teachers at that school in terms of math instruction, but I'm also working with students and parents. Because oftentimes when educators see you come and do professional development, the question is, can you do that? And so in these programs, I often show them, yes, everything that I'm telling you to do, I actually know how to do, and I can do it real time with kids. So I'm so proud of the work we did. Our last session with them is next week. But as we begin to talk about this transformative education, this is where the real work is, making sure we have a great impact on our students. Next slide. So first, I want to thank from the bottom of my heart, Michelle Richardson Bailey. I want to thank Dr. Brian McDonald, Dr. Elizabeth Blanco, my co-presenter. Definitely want to shout out Pacific Oaks College and Dr. Jarrell Hill. Also want to thank Collaborate Pasadena. And lastly, definitely saw her in the building, my good friend Nia, who I had an opportunity to speak with in their council session, the African American Parent Council. So thank you all for extending this warm and inviting invitation. I want to define transformative education for us and to really launch this conversation, right? And when I think about transformative, the definition causing a marked change in someone or something. In my presentation, you're going to see words bolded. And when I think about transformative, I think about change, and change really resonates. So as we have this town hall discussion today, I really want us to keep change in the forefront of our mind when we think about the word transformative. And then when we think about education, I always think about education as the methods of teaching and learning in schools. So before I can do anything, make any changes at a school, it is very important that we think about what is the methodology of teaching and learning that has happened in that space. Next slide. So when we put that together, we say transformative education. And it's the teaching and learning in schools that changes individuals into healthy and happy learners. And I'm going to zero in on that healthy and happy learners because oftentimes we talk about students, but I often ask and challenge educators, what type of students are you trying to produce? And I always say you want to produce students and individuals that are healthy and happy, who make informed decisions and actions for themselves, their communities, and their world. Because I'm not just interested in making sure that that individual can do well, but I want them to make sure that they are always thinking about not only myself, but how is this impacting my community? How is this impacting my world? Because when we think about transformative education, let's be very clear. I'm about preparing students so that they can be a global force in society, right? So that they can communicate with individuals across borders, across various landscapes. So when we think about transformative educators, I'm really thinking about it from that frame of reference. Next slide. The road to transformative education. Really want to structure this talk around the work that I've done. Black Boys Lived and Everyday Experiences in STEM. I say go pick up the book. It's a good book, not because I say it's a good book, because I've had educators and administrators and superintendents actually engage this work, and they found it to be very useful as they begin to think about the road to transformative education. So a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about are really going to be referencing a lot of the research that comes from this book. This is an ethnographic piece because I actually took an in-depth study and looked and followed 4 African-American boys, high schoolers, and really had really dug deep into how they experience K through 12 teaching and learning. And so I believe it helps us really move the needle forward in transformative education. Next slide. Summoned. That's an actual chapter in the book titled Summon. And so I think it's appropriate when we have this conversation. And when I use the word summon, I say means calling on someone to be present. Transformative education demands that educators are present. And I'm going to say that again. Transformative education requires educators to be present. And what do I mean by this? Anytime I engage audiences with transformative education, educators must know themselves. And for order for them to know themselves, they have to do an identity excavation. And everything that I say is, I'm telling you, is something that I've also done as a teacher. And I've taught elementary, middle, and high school before I became a university professor. So I've actually navigated all of those spaces. And one of the things that educators must do if they are to be truly effective in the classroom space is to really think deeply about their own childhood learning experiences, their adulthood. Because what happens when you do that, you really get to think deeply about what are the biases and presuppositions that I hold. Because I believe philosophically, no one enters the education field to do harm to children, right? But there are presuppositions and biases that we all need to unpack. Even me as an African-American male teacher, starting my career teaching second grade, I had to unpack the fact that I grew up in a working middle class family. I had to rethink what parental involvement looked like. I had to rethink that maybe someone doesn't have the family support that I had, the experiences that I had, right? Because there were things that I required of my students that sometimes they weren't able yet to give me, but I was there to help motivate and bring it out of them. So it's really important as educators that we do this identity excavation. And before we start talking about outcomes of what we want our students to have, we want our kids to be technologically savvy and sound, I really need to unpack who are my educators, first of all, teaching my students. So important step on the journey to transformative education is if educators do not know themselves, it is impossible to create a teaching and learning environment where children can become their best selves. So it's very important that any school district that is embarking on transformative education, you have to think about how are your educators showing up for the children that they are tasked to serve. That's something. Mitigating circumstances and fraught relationships. Educators must understand the set of situations that have affected the decision of an individual. Historical and current relations in schooling. Oftentimes, educators must wrestle with the fact, and we must really think deeply about what is the type of language that children have been subjected to. I've talked over my career, I've talked to undergraduate and graduate African-American and Latinx and Indigenous students, and they've remembered something so deep that a first grade teacher told them, or a second grade teacher told them, or how that person made them feel. And so it's very important that we think about language that we use. Educators think about the language that they use when teaching children, right? Because this has an impact on what the decision a child can make. I have so many students, even in that first photo that you saw, young person right here, the person that you see, Jade, one of my greatest students, right? She had a fear of speaking and sharing her knowledge and sharing her ideas because someone earlier in her teaching career didn't privilege and honor her voice. And so we have to be very careful on the language that we use. And so when we talk about transformative education, I'm very clear that we have to think about how are educators transforming themselves. We have to think about the community context, right? We have to think about the intergenerational trauma, school trauma that African-American parents have faced. I've talked to parents and parents say, I want my child to do well in math. But oftentimes they have a fear of math themselves. And so when I ask them, what do you actually want for your child? Sometimes they're nervous and they don't understand because they're trying to unpack the intergenerational trauma that they faced, right? So we need educators to really become aware of this. Past experiences with teachers also impact how students, the decisions that students make. And last but not least, and I've been on the policy side of this, damaging educational policy, restricting subject matter content. Hey, listen, I don't know why in most impoverished schools and actually in the nation, We privilege English language arts, and we privilege math teaching and learning. Yet, I know some of my best reach in some of my students was through visual and performing arts, was through science, was through history. And so we have to begin to think, how are we thinking about the holistic nature of the child and where their interests lie so that we can really transform education. Next slide. Dirt. Educators must come to terms with the fact that statistics have been used to classify Black and brown children as academically inferior, blocking success. When I talk to schools and school districts, it's important that we really begin to drill down on the power of disaggregated data. The schools that I work with now, most of the time when I begin to do strategic planning with a lot of the administrators and educators, I say, what is the disaggregated data? Because I need to know how each racial ethnic group is doing. Why do I ask that? Because I want to create a community that cares. When one hurt, we all hurt. And so we have to really begin to think about, how are we using stats? Are we using it to harm? Or are we using it to inform and build community? And how are we helping folks become proactive? We also have to really value different ways of knowing. Our students, and it's something that was alluded to by the parents, we have to honor the different ways that kids know. We have some kinesthetic learners, we have some visual learners, we have some auditory learners. You're looking at a kid who had a lot of spatial reasoning, but most teachers didn't know how to speak to that. And so how do we begin? Transformative education really relies on, how are we valuing different ways of knowing in the classroom? And we can't just look to standardized tests to give us all the answers that we need. We really got to assess knowledge in different ways. So when you see on that last slide, Jade was standing in front of a chart paper. That was her knowledge. That was her thinking. And she was able to communicate reasoning and proof in mathematics to me. And that is something that she's never done in her math journey. And so she was proud, and students are able to see and able to be happy about how they're showcasing their thinking. We got to assess knowledge in different ways, y'all. We also have to broaden the scope of traditional subjects. This is a big one, because as I go from school to school now, I'm still seeing things done that were happening when I was a child. So we have to broaden the way that we're thinking about learning, infusing technology and doing all of these things that can really hook kids and really increase our engagement levels. We also have to honor how children think about themselves. That is incredibly important to us. Next slide. Caged, last tenet, structure of bars or wires in which children are confined. The important question on this journey to transformative education, I really want folks to wrestle with this question is, how can educators incorporate families, community leaders, business, and cross-cultural relationships with other children across the world so that schooling is not caged? I say that because when I talk about transformative education, and I said students need to not only think about themselves, they need to think about their community, they need to think about their world. How are we integrating that in school spaces? I'm really perplexed how many school spaces are closed off to business leaders, closed off to entrepreneurs, closed off to families. So many families don't feel safe in so many school spaces. And so transformative education really helps us really think deeply about, how do we remove the bars, the wires, and stop prevent kids from being caged, and incorporate the local community context so the education really is transformative. Next slide. Road to transformative education, okay? Summon. Mitigating circumstances and fraught relationships, dirt and caged. I hope I have you now thinking deeply about what transformative education should really look like. And we have to start with some deep mindsets and some deep thinking and some critical thinking and analysis. Next slide. That's my time. I wanted to make sure I stayed within the parameters given. Thank you so much. I look forward to engaging you all in questions and answers. I see you, Nia. Thank you. Thank you for the love, Nia. I see you. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. That was amazing. That resonated with me in so many different ways. And I can't wait for us to engage in deeper conversations around those areas that you have brought up: summoned, mitigating circumstances, dirt, caged, all very important issues as they relate to transformative education. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald.
All right. And now we'll go back to Ms. Bowman for another game.
Let me unmute myself. I thought we were gonna have Q&A. That's okay, let's do this game. Let's do this game here. So it's really a poll, so it's anonymous. I always think it's imperative, just like an educator. What did you know in the beginning? What did you take from the lesson, and what are some improvements? Feedback is imperative to actual having change. If there's no level of engagement, no call and response, then how do we know how to make that level of improvement? So hopefully, I'm terrified to do it on my own. Geoff, can I lean on you for the support that you always give to me? You're so gracious.
Yes, if you need, you can put the link in the chat and then I can pull it up if we need to.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out how that works.
But why don't we try, if you want to try sharing your screen first, we can do that. Whatever you feel comfortable doing.
I want to give it a go. I want to try it Okay, sharing screen. I'm on a Mac, so it's not what I use for work, so possibly. Whiteboard Zoom. No, I don't want to use that. Let me get out of that. And perhaps, do you guys see my screen this time around?
We saw the whiteboard for a minute, but then, so when you click on share screen below, I think we're just seeing the whiteboard. If there's another screen present below, there's usually a series of screens. I don't know if that.
Let me see.
You may have to scroll down a little below the whiteboard.
I sent it to you via email just to be super sure. Let me stop sharing. So share. And so you see the whiteboard, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me just get out of this whiteboard. My goodness, this technology is going to be the death of me. Can someone send me to 1900s? I think I should have been born at that time. So the screen is gone, but I have a set of tabs that are open.
Okay.
I'm sure it's just a matter of me not being savvy with the Mac. My desktop at work, for whatever reason, is far more agreeable.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the Mac platform for Zoom. If you want, we could have Dr. Blanco present, and then maybe you can send me the link and I can get this loaded up, and then we can do that afterwards.
Oh, I've sent it to you. I sent while I was taking notes, like I mentioned to you all, I write still. So I've sent it over to you some time ago.
You know what? But I think that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and let Dr. Blanco.
Yeah, and then Denise, you and I can chat on the.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, very good. So we'll come back to our game here in a minute. So let me introduce Dr. Elizabeth Blanco, who is the Chief Academic Officer for the PUSD. So she's a key member of my cabinet. As a matter of fact, per board policy, she is second in command. Should something happen to me, she gets to take over leadership of the district. And she is leading systemic change, resulting in equity, access, and increased student achievement for students. Dr. Blanco provides leadership for the academic division, or academics division rather, including pre-K through 12 instruction, multilingual, arts, gifted magnet, and college and career programs. Her passion is social justice, achieved by her focus on inclusive practices, continuous improvement, cross-departmental planning, negotiated agreements, and so forth. Prior to joining PUSD, the second time around, Dr. Blanco served as a chief executive for the San Francisco Unified School District, where she redesigned instructional practices and special education services to decrease disproportionality and increase graduation rates. Dr. Blanco holds a doctorate in urban education leadership from the University of Southern California. She also has a master's degree in educational administration and a second master's in special education from Cal State LA, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in Child Development, also from Cal State LA. Dr. Blanco was named Special Educator of the Year by the Association of California School Administrators and has served as a mentor for aspiring administrators participating in a mentoring program of the California Association of Latino Superintendents and Administrators. So, Dr. Blanco, with no further ado, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. Pleasure to be here tonight with all of you and talk about, one of my greatest passions is transformation and learning from others every day. When Dr. McDonald was reading all of that, sometimes it's hard to believe that I could have ever achieved it because I was in a school system that didn't believe in me. And it was a school system where my parents thought they were moving so I would have a better life. And I faced a lot of discrimination and did a lot of things that sometimes the principals call me up and tell me about, and from high school particularly, and I think I did that when I was in school. So, it is really just an honor to have been able to spend the rest of my life in education after it wasn't the best experience for me, in hopes to change it for, other children and their parents. My parents had a lot of faith in the system. So whatever the system told them, they believed. And I wasn't always directed in ways that could help me achieve to my full potential. But I think I've caught up a little bit now. And so I'm, happy to be here with you tonight and be able to serve Pasadena Unified. So I think, Jeff, you have my presentation. Thanks. So, transforming and entering an era of transformation education is what Mrs. Bailey wanted me to speak about. And we are transforming in many ways in Pusd, but what I'm going to speak about tonight is really a partnership that we have with Pacific Oaks College and Branch Ed Partners. So, sorry, Jeff, can you go back to that first slide? Transformation education, I think this was stated also by Dr. Wilson, really involves teaching and learning geared to motivate and empower happy and healthy learners. And that's something I think that we do very well at Pusd. We have so many partners and services for our students. We want them to be healthy to learn and motivated. And we also want them to grow up to be able to contribute back to their community at the individual, community, and global levels. Last night, I attended a awards ceremony with the Kiwanis, and to hear so many accomplishments of our students was just really heartwarming. And a lot of the students had far surpassed the level of community service hours that they were required for graduation. And just really, when they talked about how they were thankful for the awards they were receiving, many of them, almost all of them, said they wanted to come back and give to the Pasadena community when they finished college. So I think we are teaching children, the right values in terms of individual accomplishments and giving back to their community. You can go to the next one now. So as I mentioned, the Branch Alliance for Educator Diversity has working with us and Pacific Oaks to really be able to help us recruit and retain teachers that meet our needs, match our students, and help, even if they're not the same race or ethnicity, that they have the same values and care about our students and connect with them. So this is just a little diagram that shows how we intersect and work together, and we believe many of the same things. To be selected to participate in this grant, you do have to have similar core values. We're in cohort 3, so we're the 3rd cohort that's embarking on this, and it will be a partnership that we have for a few years. So we're very excited about it. We believe it can transform teaching and learning in our school district. You can go to the next one. So this is the framework that we're using for quality preparation of our educators. One of the exciting activities that we are embarking on is creating a educator profile. And in the educator profile, looking at not only a person that's a teacher, but everyone in the organization. What would we want them, what kind of attributes and values would we want them to have to work in Pasadena Unified? But for the teaching part of this, this is the framework that we're looking at, that, you know, they come out and they're a community of learners, that they use data to make decisions, that there's an intersexual content of teaching, knowledge, assessment, and engagement including, you know, social, emotional, and academic engagement, a practice-based approach, direct experiences. We're hoping to be having more interns and give fieldwork experiences in our classrooms before teachers come into the profession. An inclusive pedagogy, which is really important, so that our teachers value students for who they are and really understand and connect with them. And then equitable experiences to make sure that the teachers have equal experiences and support, and that they're ready to be successful. You know, we've looked at different pipelines and we've seen that teachers of color don't always have the same support systems and opportunities as other teachers. So this is another area that we're really working together to, you know, make sure that the pipeline and success rate is the same for all of our teachers. You can go to the next slide. So this is the vision or the theory of action for the Transformation Center at Pacific Oaks College prepares and implements sustainable quality, then programming at scale, then more teachers will be better prepared to positively impact outcomes for our students. And Pasadena, as hiring, professional support, and retention practices aligned to competencies and cultural responsivity, then more teachers will be in a better position to positively impact outcomes for our students. You could go to the next slide. So this one you might have to click on a couple times. Maybe one more time. So what it is and what it's not, this is a little bit academic, but I think it is important to understand this piece, that what it is transformation and continuous improvement, looking at the plan, study, act, do, getting better at the work we're doing together. It's not just focused on getting the college and accreditation check in the box. Infrastructure development, working with our human resources department and our academics department on developing what teachers really need to be successful. It's not just a typical grant funding initiative that colleges often engage in, but it's something more than that. So really the behavior practice shifting for education preparation programs is here, and our partner, we're the partner with Pacific Oaks to make those changes that are necessary for teachers to be successful. It's more than just an assignment where someone's coaching a fieldwork type of assignment for teachers. And then a lot of technical assistance comes with this grant from Branch Ed and also from Pacific Oaks. A lot of the information that I'm going to share this evening, I've learned from professors that like Dr. Stanley Johnson and other, Pedro Noguero and Dr. Hill. So the information that we're learning as part of this network is really valuable to all of us as educators, not just the teachers. And so the funds for positions and other resourcing, is not the only area that we're really focusing on. We have a lot of professional development opportunities, and we're a community, a network working together. You can go to the next slide, please. You might have to click it a couple more times. So these are the areas, the domains of the transformation. We're looking at the quality of program for teachers, the scale. How do we scale this to last beyond when this grant is gone, with the sustainability when we don't have this resource anymore? We want to be able to, transform our human resources actions and support connections with the college. And then the impact, that we would have diverse, effective new teachers that are retained in our schools. Because I mentioned earlier, retention is often a problem if people aren't feeling like they're connected and welcomed even as adults. You can go to the next slide. So this is just a snapshot of what we've done in year one and what we have planned to do for year two. In year one, we identified our priorities. There's a document called the destination card, and we have lots of areas that we're working on. And then we looked at our graduate competencies for the teachers, our educator competencies, as I mentioned, with the educator profile. And we're collecting data in both these areas. And then we have an opportunity to learn from the experts in the field, as I had mentioned. So hopefully Dr. Johnson will hear some of the things that we've talked about and worked on this evening. So we are, for next year, establishing our priority work groups, and we will be getting the students into our classrooms from Pacific Oaks. And then we're going to be collaborating with the teachers on the educator competencies. We did some initial work this year with our ethnic studies teachers and the student think tank as part of this grant. And, we recently presented some of those outcomes to our Board of Education. So that's real exciting work, as Dr. McDonald mentioned. That's part of the transformation. And then, continuing a stronger collaboration between academics and human resources, so we can identify, professional development and hiring practices that will support, our teachers, recruit stronger candidates, and also be able to support them, in their first years when they're, needing the most types of support to improving their practice of, how they educate students. You could go to the next one. So this is just a snapshot that I thought might be interesting to look at our race and ethnicity of our current K-12 teachers and students. You could see in some areas we're doing well, and the student proportion and the teacher proportion is close together. In other areas, we definitely need to focus on, recruiting more teachers of particular race and ethnicity, so that our students can have models and experiences, hear from people who look like them and have had similar life experiences. But as I mentioned earlier, the most important thing is that all of our teachers have an opportunity to learn about cultural competence, cultural empathy, and instructional practices, regardless of what race they are, so they can relate and connect with our students and help them become the global citizens we would like them to become, and reach the attributes of the graduate profile. You could go to the next one. So what are our priorities in terms of this particular transformative endeavor that we're on? Is really, to confront systems that set up our schools to fail, develop a diverse educator pipeline. We are also working with additional colleges to have induction programs and, programs where we have interns and residents. So we're approaching, this from many different ways and with a few different partners. That we have a culturally competent instructional practices where our teachers are able to really embrace the differences of others and value the differences of others, and then foster and build positive relationships with our students and our families. And as was mentioned in the beginning, it's really important that we address the health and social needs of our children. If they're not coming to school with all of their basic needs met, then it is really hard for them to learn. And increase parent and community involvement and engagement, make sure that parents feel welcome. And, look at this in a way that is a community. We have embarked on a lot of community schools in the last couple of years. We have 8 now, and we just received a new grant to continue the community schools. So we're really excited about that, but that's one of the ways that we can help our parents feel comfortable and welcome as part of our school system. You could go to the next one. Dr. McDonald mentioned this already, our litmus test, and how we will use the litmus test to make decisions as an executive leadership team and throughout the organization, and really look at the impact of our actions and how it directly impacts our students, BIPOC students in particular, or marginalized students or employees. And are the decisions we make, are they at the expense of harming marginalized groups or any group? And does the action contribute to a sense of belonging for our BIPOC students and marginalized groups? One area that we still want to grow in is that every student feels welcome and successful and valued at school. We hear from our students that there are some students, as many as have success, there are still some students that are feeling that maybe adults don't value them the way we would want them to. So that's an area that we really do want to improve on. We're doing that through the think tank, through student focus groups, and lots of surveys. So the information comes to us in many different ways, and even to an individual level with some of the survey work that we're doing, where we can go back and really help the student feel successful or connect them with an adult that can turn that around. Okay, that's the next question is questions. If anyone has any questions on any of the work that we're doing with the Transformation Center, or work that we're doing in the area of, other work, I'm happy to try to answer.
All right, thank you, Dr. Blanco. That was an excellent presentation. And I hope that you all were able to see the alignment between the two presentations. Especially on that priorities slide that you just presented, I could see the connections to many of the things that Dr. Wilson talked about. So I really love it when things come together and align. So with that said, let us now go back to Ms. Bowman, after which we'll have our question and answer session, and I'm really looking forward to that. We have
we're actually sorry, Dr. McDonald. We're gonna set up the game for after Q&A, because it's gonna take a few minutes to get that set up. So why don't we go ahead and jump into Q&A? Excellent.
We have a lot of brain power here between Dr. Wilson, Dr. Blanco, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Hill. So we should be able to get all your questions answered. So why don't we just dive right in? Let's see. Is the chat open, Jeff?
Yes, chat is open. People can also raise their hands and unmute themselves now. So.
All right. So
I'm sure it'll take a second for them to.
Okay. Okay, Miss Bailey, I see your hand. Miss Nia Bailey.
Yes, hello, everybody. I have a couple of questions. All the presentations were great. For Kamai, I just want to start with you. I was really drawn to a lot of the things that you shared. I thought there was a lot of value in that. I wanted to know, I was particularly when you were talking about the work that you do and follow through with parents and the math core group that you're working with and how that's going in the 3:30 to 5 o'clock session. Are you noting improvements in parents feeling more connected to the school as well? I know you noticed you mentioned some things that you're seeing in the students, but how is it also going with parents and then their relationships back to the teachers?
So thank you for that question, Nia. I always tell folks the way into students is through parents. So one of the ways that I think for me, any work that I do at any school, it's very important. Any principal that I've worked with, any school that I've worked with for that matter, they know that I'm always going to ask, where's the parents? Because I want to engage with the parents. So what we've done, I'll tell you, it's called our Black Student Voices Town Hall. And so what we've attached to the Young Black Mathematician Initiative, it's called the Black Student Voices Town Hall. And so that's every month we meet with the parents in a virtual space. And I actually, first of all, I have kids showcase what they've been learning and engaging in our Young Black Mathematicians Initiative. So students present the math and how they think about it, how they initially thought about it before I explained it to them, and now this new way of thinking, because I really try to teach our students how to showcase not only their mathematical thinking, but also reasoning and proofing. And I also want them to just build their self-confidence in how they present the information that they know. And so they do that in the context of the parent group. And then also I have a real session with the parents. So we're working out problems with the parents. I talk to kids. I talk to parents on how to support their children in math teaching and learning, but also in how to just take it out of the conventional boxing in. Hey, when you're at the grocery store, let's do this. When you're at the park, when you're at a football game, a basketball game, how do we do this work, right? Because parents think sometimes it has to be so traditional. And I try to have parents think outside of the box. So we engage in this rich dialogue. And lastly, I invite special guests. Because not only do I want them to hear my voice, but I also want them to hear other educators in the community on ways to how to support their children. So not only do we talk about math, but I invited guests. I recently just had a young brother who created, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, the Black Wall Street game. And he has a board game that he's created. We had him come in and do a presentation. And actually I had him come and be a part of Young Black Mathematicians and actually teach a lesson. And we actually played in real time. And so these are the things that I like to expose, not only the students, but the parents, because it's work in the community, right? It's in tandem. And so any transformative education piece that you have, I'm very clear. If parents aren't a part of that process and embedded in that process, we're not really transforming anything, because not only to just, you can't just transform the student in isolation. You must transform the parent and the community as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Thank you. Would it be okay, Dr. McDonald, for me to ask Dr. Blanco a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, Dr. Blanco, when you were sharing the information, the data related to the teachers, ethnic, relative student population, racially or grouping, and that slide right there, do you have a slide that lets us know where the grade levels those teachers are placed in? Because from what there's a lot of research supporting that it's really important for our students to get that level of diversity in those early years and those TK5 years. So I'm just wondering if we have charts to really show where people are placed as you guys are undergoing all the work that you're doing at the district.
Dr. McDonald did ask for that from Human Resources a while ago. So I don't know if that data is still accurate, because we have a lot of movement in the district, but I think that's something that we should really look at. And thank you for sharing about the early years as we're looking at the litmus test and placements. I think that's something we really should consider.
Mr. Darden.
Yes. Good evening,
Good evening.
everyone. I too was going to follow up on that question that Nia just asked about concerning the chart of the ethnicity. And I don't even know if we could, I just wanted to get a little better understanding of data, the bar data that was being exhibited, and maybe I'm the only one that might not be familiar with that, but if you could explain that chart just a little bit more, because it did look pretty interesting with some of the differences in the graph.
Yeah, so I did ask our senior research analyst to, give me some information in terms of race and ethnicity and the proportion compared to. And I believe that she did use the report that we have for our CBEDS data and a report for Hanover to show the proportion of students and the proportion of teachers. I could ask her for the specific ends on each bar if that would, help clarify it all. But this is the information that that she gave me. So what?
Okay.
Ask her to give me more information on these numbers if you like, if you tell me the specific questions.
Okay, yeah, and Dr. Blanco, I guess I'll shoot you a note just concerning that, because I just wanted to understand. I mean, I was just looking at the closeness in data between the teachers and students with the African Americans, and then there seemed to be a huge gap where the teachers were for white and or Hispanic.
Right.
There seems to be a major disparity, and I didn't know what that was telling me.
Yeah, so I can tell you really quickly
Okay, thank you.
that I think as a district, we're doing quite well, because the national average for the percentage of white teachers in any school system is pretty significant. I think it might be somewhere around 70 or so percent. And if somebody has that exact number, please correct me. So the fact that we're down at about 38% of our school system, or of our teachers rather, being white, I think we're kind of headed in the right direction. I want to be careful with my words here, because what we're trying to achieve is what we have with the African American students. If you notice, the percentage of students and the percentage of teachers are almost a perfect match.
Right.
We would want to see that with our Latino students as well. And we're not seeing that. We're seeing a huge disparity there, because we have around 60% of our students identified as Latino, but then we have only about 36% of our teachers from the same ethnicity. So we want to close that gap a little bit. And by the same token, we noticed that we have a disproportionate number of white teachers as opposed to, when compared to the number of white students that are in the district.
Right.
So again, I'm heartened by the fact that I think we are headed in the right direction. We've closed the gap as it relates to African-American kids, but we have more work to do in some of these other areas, mostly around the Latino kids.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that clarification.
Okay. And I need to get that that national average, the percentage of teachers in schools across in urban, especially in urban settings across the country, the percentage of white teachers. So I'll try to get that that percentage, that estimate for you here in a minute.
Thank you so much.
Dr. McDonald,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add that if you go back to what Nia's question, what she was trying to say, is the placement of those African-American teachers. If you look at where they are, they're not where the studies show that the students who experience African-American teachers in the lower grade levels are more likely to go to college. I think that's what we're looking at. We already know, if you look across the board, that the numbers kind of balance, but we need them to be in the right grade levels. That's what we're looking for.
Yes, absolutely. you're spot on with that. So that's something that we definitely will have to look at. And Ms. Dufford posted in the chat that in California, 23% of students are white, but 63% of teachers are white. So I think we're doing much better than the state average. And nationally, it's 69% of teachers in urban schools are white, 69%. So again, I think we're headed in the right direction. All right, Ms. Diaz-Allen had her hand up earlier.
Yes. Thank you. So I wanted to bring us back to some of the things that Dr. Wilson was covering, which kind of go to just the essence of what we're looking for here, which is amazing teachers, right? I mean, we just want teachers who are present, who just care about kids, who are doing the best they can, and to not only to get those teachers, but to retain them, right? We need to pay them. We need to pay them what they're worth. And I know I'm opening up a big can of worms here. I know it's expensive, but we need to pay them the best that we can. And we need to fight for them to have affordable housing in the place or near the place where they teach. When I was talking about some of the examples of just amazing teachers in my children's lives, I specifically selected a teacher that we were always afraid of losing because he had to drive over an hour just to get to school, right? And so I just want to invite us to, yes, keep developing this amazing program and keep going in this direction, which is, I think, absolutely the right direction to go in, but expand a little bit more and include the community in these conversations, work with our elected officials, and look at our properties and see what we can do with them, right? So I know these things are all happening. I just want to just get real about it, right?
Yes.
This is how you keep these amazing teachers that you found and you trained. We don't want to lose them to other districts once we go through all that trouble. We want to keep them. So just want to put that out there. That's all. Thank you.
No, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And you won't get any sort of disagreement from me. We're in agreement. Of course, as it relates to pay, I think we made an important step in addressing some of the issues that we've had in the past around teacher pay, specifically as it relates to the salary schedule. And just really quickly, I think a part of the problem has been that we haven't been able to address the part of the salary schedule, I'd say year 9 and above, where teachers no longer got a step increase. So it was the frozen part of the salary schedule. So thankfully, we were able to address that this year. So going forward, all teachers will have a step increase every year. And I do think that the raise that we gave, it certainly was the best in the last 15 to 20 years. So that's not insignificant. It is a significant raise. So we're headed in the right direction. Of course, all of this issue is a function of funding or the lack of funding from the state, or the lack of appropriate funding from the state. There is good news in the governor's budget. So, I think we'll be able to do a little bit more. As far as affordable housing, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. And this is actually something that Ms. Bailey, Board Member Bailey, is really passionate about and has been doing some work in this area, this issue of workforce housing. She's talked to Senator Portantino. She's talked to the city folks in the housing department, just trying to think of ways for us to attack this issue. And of course, with Measure O, it might be a possibility. So I know she's thinking about all these things, and she's on the facilities subcommittee, board subcommittee. So this is on her radar and she's working on it. I don't know if she wants to say a few words on the topic. We're trying to get her to rest her voice, but I know she's so passionate about this that she might want to weigh in. So I'll give you that opportunity now, Ms. Bailey, if you'd like to. Otherwise, we'll move on.
No, you covered it. It's a work in progress. We're actually at the point now where we're about to do a feasibility study on one of our properties. So it's moving along. We're also talking about trying to schedule and organize community meetings so that we can bring the community into the awareness of what we're doing around this issue. So it's coming. Thank you.
Right, excellent. Very good. So there's a question in the couple of questions now in the chat. Do we currently have a teacher shortage? And I would say we do have a national teacher shortage. I think, and Dr. Blanco, you might want to weigh in. We have taken proactive steps to avoid this particular issue of a teacher shortage through our residency programs and through this partnership that we have with Pacific Oaks. So I don't know that we will be affected quite like some of the other districts around, or even some of the districts nationally. You know, but we continue to be proactive around the recruitment of teachers, especially teachers of color. And I think at the end of the day, we should be okay. We are a declining enrollment district, so we will have to lose a few positions because we have less kids than we had even 2-3 years ago. So we'll see how it all shakes out. A lot has to do with the number of kids that show up for school in the new school year. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll see a stabilization of our enrollment. We do have an enrollment committee that I convened that will be looking at strategies by which we can stabilize our enrollment or even increase it. So, and of course, that has a direct impact on us being able to hang on to our teachers, especially those younger teachers, or newer to the profession, I should say. All right, let's move on to Ms. Bowman. She has made a comment, and it reads, "It may be worth it, in addition to what Ms. Lara is mentioning, to consider fostering a partnership with other educational institutions like PCC to start building a pathway for BIPOC students to merge into the teaching/educational sector, specific to Black teachers, more specifically Black male teachers." So, Dr. Blanco, did you want to weigh in? I know that we have that one of our board members, Dr. Pomeroy, is very passionate about this particular topic, and has met with staff to think about how we can, possibly establish an academy within our district that would prepare students to enter the field of education, specifically to become teachers. So this is something that we're thinking about. I'm not sure that we'll be able to pull it off, but it's certainly on our radar. And I think we're finding success with our residency programs, so that might be enough for now. But we're looking at all possibilities.
May I ask?
We are planning the, setting the plans for the pathway. We have begun planning it internally, but we're not at the point where we're ready to present it to the board. But it is something that we feel would be very valuable and beneficial to our students and to the district.
Is it worth it to possibly discuss what the obstacles are in starting to implement that pathway? Or are you guys just still in the beginning strategic planning stages and trying to figure out how to facilitate?
Obstacles with any program that we begin are usually financial. I think that when Mrs. Bailey approached me once in the hallway about ethnic studies, right? And I went back to our leaders, Ms. Hill being one of them, and she said, we're going to do this again. We're going to prepare everything, and then we're going to be told we don't have any money. I said, no, it's not going to happen this time. And it didn't, right? And so I think it's about prioritizing with the board where the priorities are and bringing ELT a comprehensive plan with a cost analysis. If you recall, we're also able to open up an Armenian DLIP program in the middle of the pandemic. So there's always enough money to do what you want, but not enough money to do everything you want. So you have to look at it. And so, you know, from Dr. Byron's perspective, she'll probably say, well, what are you going to give up, right? But we did get some good information about the May revise in terms of career tech ed. So I think that will strengthen our proposal and ask when we bring the proposal forward.
Excellent. Lots of good comments in the chat. Anybody care to unmute and say a few words here on your comments?
Well, I think they're all good comments, and we are aware that's, you know, why we are in the Transformation Center project and in the Alder Residency project. We do, you know, want to recruit more teachers. We've engaged in a series of anti-racist training, which really focuses on cultural proficiency, cultural competency, and cultural empathy. 6 of our schools have been involved in depth study with all of their staff. Our district leadership network has gone through the series, and our whole principals team. So it's something that's very important to us, and we're going to continue to work on making sure that the teachers we have employed and employees that work here do develop those skills if they don't already possess them, and continue to work with outside partners to be able to bring more teachers that into Pasadena that, you know, are from different backgrounds.
Ms. Diaz-Allen?
Yes, I'm curious as to what the teachers who are participating are saying about the program. And the other part of my question is how much of your advisory, as it were, is made up of teachers themselves? I'm the daughter of a teacher. I have to ask these questions, right? Like, are you really asking the teachers what they think about it, whether they like it? And so just I'm curious.
You want to take that, Dr. Blanco?
Yeah, so for this particular project, you know, we're in year 1 developing all the competencies, and you know, really the colleges would be getting the information on the effectiveness of the program, but you know, they will be sharing that with us. With our Alder residency program, we're a little further into it, and I think the teachers have found it very effective because they are also released 1 day a week for professional development, and we do have to report back, of course, to, you know, the grantees to the grantors on progress. So there are particular metrics that we have to meet. And then Mr. Hill has done rounds with our ethnic studies teachers to, you know, see how they're perceiving some of the work that we're doing. So I think we are trying to make sure that we include the voice of the teachers. If you recall, I think many of you were part of the group where we really tried to get a grant from the Hewlett Foundation. And one of the reasons that we wanted this grant is because we were working under the premise of doing things with, as opposed to doing things to our employees and to our students. And we've continued, even though we didn't get the grant, to keep that focus and try to make that change in our culture.
Excellent. Miss Nia Bailey?
Yep. Last question. I won't hug up all the time.
That's okay. We have a little bit of time.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the litmus test a little bit, Dr. Blanco, because we know so much of this transformative work, it's going to be happening on the local level, right, at the school site. So I think I understand, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that the litmus test is something how the district is viewing policy actions and things like that. But I'm trying to still understand how a student might report a concern, maybe that an adult didn't see it that way, or as Kamai was saying, maybe if you're coming, you can be a Black person coming from middle-class background and may not see where there's an equity issue, you just don't catch it. So where might a student or a teacher or a staff person who would they give that information to, and how does that kind of work?
Well, there could be many different avenues. I know that, particularly like in our ethnic studies program, teachers are really listening to student voice and learning so much and sharing with their colleagues, right? So they're bringing awareness to other teachers because their students are given that opportunity. Also in our graduate defense, which we're all including at the middle school, students are able to share their experiences, and that's a culminating activity. So we want them to be able to share some of these experiences earlier, not just only when they're exiting, because we want to learn from their experiences. So I think that they have relationships with certain adults on the campus, and many of our schools are making sure that children, particularly children that might not be as successful, they're taking on groups of children to make sure they can make a connection with them, right? So that they have an adult they can come to in the school. So in terms of like a formalized process for going to an adult, I wouldn't say that we necessarily have one for students other than going to their teachers or their principals. But if that's an area that you're seeing that we can really, improve on and let students know that there's a formalized process, we can work on that. I think our parents, for the most part, can find through the uniform complaint policy or the internet with our connections who to go to if they're not getting answers at the school site. But children, especially younger ones, might need some reinforcement in understanding what to do if there is a problem they want to express.
That's helpful. I think though that back to what Kamai was talking about, and you talked about it as well, it's the really the fostering community and people feel safe to share. Because students don't always feel safe in those spaces, even for like senior defenses to really always be honest, because they're not sure what they can say. And those don't always, so there's different levels, and parents, they don't always know how to utilize the tools that you're describing. So that can be something parent groups can be more effective at communicating those kind of things. So we might need more of a roadmap, maybe a separate conversation. Thanks.
And we might want to think, just to interject, we might want to think about a district initiative that actually localizes these spaces and individual school sites for students to have these conversations with Pasadena personnel that they designate that would allow these safe spaces to happen, right? The school, I think I had a picture of where the students, we actually created that space there. And so those students now, they have an idea, because I was getting a lot of students telling me, this teacher, this teacher, this teacher, this teacher. And so we realized that there needed to be a specific space in the school site that really focused in on that. So I think, all the different coalitions that you have amongst parents, I think it would be great to be in conversation with the district personnel, and how do we create those spaces and localize them so that they are in each school community. And that way, I think you can create safe spaces for your students to feel healthy, happy, and whole, right? Because as we talked about that transformative education piece, it's very clear that community has to be involved in that, parents have to be involved in that, and help creating that safe space. But again, I'm very clear, it can't just be housed at the district. It also needs to be decentralized so that it is at each local school site, so kids are able to make that contribution. So that's
We're prioritizing DEI work, and there's several categories that we've looked at, right? And then our committee, we pretty much prioritized all of them and rated them, and our consultants working with us is like, no, you can't do all of them at the same time. So
right.
that's something we can keep in mind from the feedback here, that that could be an area that we would take next steps on.
Absolutely.
Mr. Harden, did you want to say anything there, or should I just read your comments? I can do that if you'd like.
No, it's okay. I'm thinking about the PTA perspective as I do. And, part of what we're trying to do is really think about how PTA units across the district can be more inclusive. And so, maybe there's a way for PTAs to, help educate and sort of increase that cultural awareness and what transformational education is and sort of how we can participate in that safe space creation. It's really a call for ideas more than anything.
That's right. Yeah, well, we would look forward to having that conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bounce around a few ideas. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, frankly, our upcoming program year, we'd like to really hang our hat on that. So I think that would be exciting.
And it really falls in line with one of my priorities for next school year, and that's to elevate the student voice. So I like where this conversation is going. These are really, really great ideas. All right, we have about 7 minutes left. So maybe we can take one more question before we play our game and wrap it up for tonight. Is there one last question?
It looks like in the chat, Christine just asked a question, so that might be.
Okay. Dr. Blanco, could you take that question? It reads, in keeping with parental involvement, I had a question about student surveys. Would you be sending copies of the survey questions to parents ahead of students filling them out? I think it goes out electronically. So go ahead, Dr. Blanco.
Yeah, I think it depends on the survey. I know there were a lot of questions around the check survey, and that's something that we have to administer in a certain way that to the students in the school. So I know that did bring up some concerns, but most surveys that we give students are through their Chromebooks, and particularly we just did some principal input surveys, and at one of the parent meetings, parents recommended that students should also be allowed to fill out that survey, and we did resend it to the high school students. The questions were the same. So it varies from survey to survey. We don't typically send out a survey and say, these are the questions we're going to ask your child in a survey, but parents, I think, have, for the most part, have access to everything that we're sending their children. So if it is a recommendation, can certainly take that back to the survey distributors. When it's the LPAC survey, I think everybody, pretty much gets the same kinds of questions. And a lot of the surveys are similar in question, and then you're checking the box whether you're a parent, student, or staff member. So I'm not sure if you're suggesting that we do let parents have that information ahead of time.
Dr. McDonald?
Yes, ma'am.
Before we end the Q&A session, I just really want to acknowledge the other 3 experts in the field that we have with us this evening that I'm aware of, and to ask them if they have anything that they would like to add to the conversation. and that is Dr. Stanley Johnson and Dr. Jarrell Hill. And I thought I saw Helen Hill. Maybe she's gone. But I just wanted to know if you all had anything that you wanted to say. Thank you. Okay, well, seeing that they don't.
No, I don't have anything, but I'm just listening to the conversation and I appreciate all the insight. I was more just listening in and kind of taking notes as we continue this journey with the district. I always say I'm an insider, but I have an outsider look as well. So I really do appreciate everything that I'm hearing. I know that we're centering the students and giving them the benefit of their humanity, and that really does help us really engage in this work at a deeper level. So I appreciate all the panelists and all the rich discussion.
Yes, the other Dr. Hill just texted me and said her internet went out. So I guess we're still having some internet problems this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
All right, so I think that wraps up our Q&A section of the meeting. I'm looking forward to our game, our final game before we wrap up for the night. It certainly was great to have beat Scott Harden in the last game, you know, so I don't know, I might quit while I'm ahead. Anyway, let me turn it back over to Miss Bowman.
Wonderful. Well, this round, it's a poll because we want to measure the effectiveness of the conversation tonight. Next time I'll get a game. We'll get, you know, our boxing gloves and Vaseline and we'll get to it. But this is more of a measurement of.
You have your ride roller coaster.
Trenton, please, sir, please. Yes. So yes. So we're gonna do like here's the QR code. You'll enter the game pin. And then from there, we'll be able to start the poll. I think this conversation was so progressive and so conducive to seeing if we can implement some active change. We have all these amazing ideas and we're doing great work for our kids. It's beautiful. It's about legacy. Okay. Do we have enough people? Okay, everyone's, okay, lovely. Everyone's signing up. Good to see. Okay. All right, look at everyone. It's doing very good. I love how our Friday nights have changed, right? When we were much younger, what we were doing, and now look at us talking about transformative education. I love the changes. It's beautiful. Okay, do we have enough? Do you think? It is late? I know everyone's tired, so maybe we should just go ahead and start. Your voice matters, it does, absolutely. So let's see what the first question will be. And what are your thoughts on the presentation tonight? Do you think it was something very informative? Are you in the middle between? Was it absolutely just not helpful? Is it somewhat informative? Ignore the spelling, I see the error. Get my red pen. Oh, wow. To get immediate results. That's amazing. I'd be disappointed with the I'm like, who would get not informative? So the next one, what are your thoughts on transformative education? Positive, negative. Do you need more information? Are you just undecided about the whole concept? How do you implement it? What are the necessary steps? What's it going to look like? Ah, lovely. So that needs more information. Miss Michelle Bailey and, you know, everyone just take all those notes. Okay, let's go to the next one. Would you like to participate in more presentations similar to this one? Let's see what everyone will assume. I hope yes, I hope so. Okay, good. Okay, awesome. And let's see. Do you believe transformative education influences academic performance? A lot of conversation sometimes is in cultural awareness and socio-emotional, but do we understand the cognitive developments of having this sort of educational model implemented in the classroom setting? Undecided, good. I'm glad to see that because that just means more work is necessary. Lovely, next question. What are some topics you want to learn more about? What are some things? Because there's always, we want to extend the conversation. How can we expand the dialogue? The culturally responsive. I want to learn about all of these, so I'm biased. I can't take this poll. All the colors and shapes. Okay, culturally responsive. And parent and teacher partnerships. There's something about the village, quite honestly, because that's what that's speaking to, relationship. Okay, next. I love that. Do you believe there's a value in parent, teacher, and per that last poll? Let's see. It seems something. The children. Oh, I love the children as always.
I'm right here. How would raise your children?
Thank you, son. Oh, very good. 100. Perfect. We've got to start developing these spaces for people to connect themselves, wear their face masks, all of that. Okay, next, because we got to get out of here. Do you feel PUSD schools practice implement the practices we learned about today? Let's be honest, straight no chaser, everybody. Tell the truth, because that feedback is helpful. It's like American Idol with the countdown, anticipating. Trenton Silencio, por favor, yeah. We've got work to do, and that's perfectly fine. Lovely. Okay, next, let's see. Did you feel engaged during this meeting? Did you feel like you were a part of this? Everybody was a part of this whole thing. I always tell you guys, I'm from the South, come eat, come over and eat. Let's chat and let's fix education one by one. Change the world. Oh, somewhat. Okay, good. Things are room for improvement. I love the feedback. Okay, so that's the wrap up of the poll. Of course, if anybody does want to view the report, it is certainly worth it to go back and research, and maybe it'll prompt a survey so we can continue to, make these elevated changes in our school district. So perfect. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Bowman. Thank you all for being here. It was great to have spent this time with you. And I do want to give Ms. Bailey the opportunity to say a few words before we wrap up.
I just want to thank the team for jumping in while I'm feeling under the weather. I apologize. And I also want to give a shout out to Nate Bradley, one of our parent panelists, for doing our background slides for us. This is the first time that I involved parents in this process, and I just really had a good time. This was fun, and thank you, everybody. Thank you. All right.
All right. Well,
and shout out to Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for everything.
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Jeff, thanks
You're a
for being
lifesaver.
I know, Jeff, you really are. I appreciate you so much.
I am so glad to do it.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you all. Have a great weekend, and we will see you soon.